Dense clouds hung over the vast, isolated fields of Dartmoor, England, when Henry Collins, a renowned American archaeologist, landed in a small village near the marsh. Henry was no adventurer. His fame came from daring discoveries in remote areas. But he knew this expedition would be different. Rumors of a centuries-old legend involving hidden treasures and the dogs of death were too irresistible for him to ignore. Still, when he set foot in the village for the first time, he felt the weight of the stories. Suspicious glances followed his every step as he dragged his suitcase to the only inn available. It was a modest place, with an aged appearance, but it had a peculiarity, a large painting of black dogs on one of the walls in the lobby. "The dogs of death," muttered Henry, unable to look away from the painting. The owner of the inn, an elderly man with a tired look, noticed the interest and let out a dry laugh. "You came after the legend, didn't you?" said the man, approaching slowly. "Something like that. I'm more interested in the treasure than the dogs, to be honest." Henry smiled, trying to sound confident, but the old man's dark expression didn't change. "Be careful what you look for, stranger. Gold has guardians, and they have no mercy." That night, while reviewing old maps in his room, Henry was startled by a sound in the distance. Howls, long and melancholy, echoed across the plains. He tried to ignore them, telling himself they were nothing more than wolves or farm dogs. However, when he turned off the lights, a heavy shadow seemed to hang around the window. He didn't have the courage to approach. Not that night. And before we continue with this intriguing story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps us bring more content like this to you. Now, let's get back to the story. The next day, Henry left early, accompanied by Margot, a young local guide with a questionable reputation. Margot was known to know Dartmoor's darkest secrets, but many avoided her because of her connection to the moor and the legends that surrounded it. It's dangerous to go into the heart of the swamp. They say that dogs appear there at night. They guard the gold of some deceased nobleman, but they are no ordinary creatures. They are beasts. Margot walked ahead, a calculating expression on her face. "And do you believe these stories?" Henry asked as he continued cautiously. "I believe in what I've seen. That's enough." Her answer was vague, but the serious tone left no room for jokes. As they advanced, the terrain became more treacherous. The occasional cries of birds of prey were the only sounds that broke the silence of the marsh. Suddenly, Margot stopped abruptly and pointed at the ground. Huge footprints were marked in the muddy ground, larger than any wolf print Henry had ever seen. "What is that?" he asked, bending down to examine the tracks. The dogs of death. They already know we're here." A cold feeling ran down Henry's spine, but he didn't say anything. Logic insisted that it could be explained, but his intuition warned him that something else was happening. With each step, the air felt heavier. Twisted trees lined the path, as if watching you pass, and the swamp seemed to come to life, with shadows dancing around you. When they finally reached a hill that Margot called the Gate, Henry was speechless. From a distance, it looked like a simple elevation of land, but up close, he could see the markings etched into the rocks, ancient symbols representing dogs with glowing eyes and sharp fangs. In the center of the hill, an entrance partially blocked by rocks seemed to lead underground. "This is where the treasure is," Margot said, looking at Henry. "But if we go in, will we come out alive?" Before Henry could respond, the same howl he had heard the night before cut through the silence. Only this time, it felt much closer. He quickly turned around, but there was nothing there. "They are coming!" Margot looked towards the swamp. "Whatever you decide to do it quickly." Henry took a deep breath, trying to shake off the rising tension. Margot remained motionless, her eyes fixed on the partially blocked entrance to the hill, while the sound of howling seemed to echo closer and closer. He knelt beside the rocks, assessing the area. There was no doubt that opening led to some kind of underground chamber. The symbols engraved around the portal, representing dogs, seemed to emit an almost living presence. "Do you really believe they come to protect something?" asked Henry, with a failed attempt to hide his nervousness. "I know they're coming. I've seen it with my own eyes, but it's not always to protect the treasure. Sometimes it is to take away anyone who dares to enter." Margot replied, without taking her eyes off the swamp. He hesitated for a moment, but he knew he couldn't back down now. Armed with a small flashlight and a crowbar, he began to carefully remove the stones that were blocking the entrance. When he finally managed to clear enough space to enter, a damp, earthy odor filled the air. "Are you coming with me?" he asked, looking at Margot. "I don't go past the entrance. My job was to bring you here." Her voice was firm, but there was a trace of fear evident. With no alternative, Henry turned on the flashlight and entered the narrow passage. The floor was uneven, and roots hung from the walls like claws. The darkness was oppressive, but he continued, driven by the promise of discovering something extraordinary. About 10 meters into the tunnel, Henry found what appeared to be an ancient altar. In its center was a small pile of gold coins, glistening dimly in the lantern light. Around, more engravings, human figures surrounded by giant dogs, as if the creatures were judges and executioners. He knelt down to pick up one of the coins, and the moment his fingers touched the cold metal, the ground shook slightly. "Margot!" he shouted, but his voice echoed without response. It was then that he heard a low growl coming from the darkness in front of him. He pointed the flashlight in the direction of the sound, but the light seemed to be swallowed by the void. Another growl, closer now, made his heart race. Suddenly, 2 glowing eyes appeared in the darkness, yellow like the gold I had just touched. Henry stood up quickly, retreating to the wall. What emerged from the shadows was a creature he could only describe as a nightmare. A gigantic dog, with fur as black as night and teeth that gleamed like blades. He didn't seem completely solid, as if his form wavered between the physical and the spectral. "It can't be," muttered Henry, unable to take his eyes off the creature. The dog advanced slowly, and for a moment Henry felt he was being assessed. The creature let out a deeper growl, and before he could react, the sound of another growl echoed behind him. He turned around, only to see another pair of glowing eyes emerge from the darkness. Henry knew he had no time to waste. With a quick movement, he dropped the coin he was holding and started running towards the exit. The dogs advanced in unison, their claws scratching the ground and making a sound that sounded like steel against stone. As he ran through the narrow tunnel, he tripped and fell, almost losing his flashlight. When he got up, he saw Margot waiting at the entrance. "Run! They're after me!" he shouted, but Margot didn't move. Instead, he held something up in his hands, a small metallic object that looked like an amulet. "Henry, stop!" she shouted, and the tone of her voice was so authoritative that he stopped instinctively. The dogs appeared right behind him, but something in the object Margot was holding stopped them. They growled, stepping back slightly, as if they were hesitating. Henry took advantage of the moment to run towards her, finally leaving the cave. "What was that?" he asked, panting as Margot lowered the amulet. "They have their rules. You invaded their territory and touched the gold. They don't forget who does it." She looked at him seriously. "From now on, you are marked by them." "Marked? What does this mean?" "It means that wherever you go, they will find you." As the two quickly walked away from the scene, the dogs' howls continued to echo in the distance. Henry looked back, seeing the black silhouettes of animals at the cave entrance, watching like predators waiting for the right moment to attack. When they returned to the village, Margot gave the amulet to Henry. "This will protect you for now, but they cannot be avoided forever. You shouldn't have touched that gold. So what do I do now? If you want to survive, you need to understand why they guard that treasure. And maybe return what you took." Henry looked at the coin that, without realizing it, he still held in his hand. The gold felt heavier now, as if it carried the weight of a curse. Back at the inn, while reviewing the maps and symbols he had found, Henry began to connect dots between the historical accounts and the mythology of the Death Hounds. He discovered that there was more than just hidden treasure. There was something buried beneath Dartmoor that could explain why these creatures existed, something no one had ever dared to investigate deeply. But before he could advance in his research, another howl sounded from outside. This time it seemed closer. Henry was sitting in the small room of the inn with the gold coin resting on the table. The light from the lamp reflected off its intense glow as if to remind him of its presence. The howl from outside cut through the silence once again, but now it was accompanied by a low growl. He quickly got up and turned off the light, moving carefully to the window. Outside, under the faint illumination of the moon, he saw a crouching figure. It was a dog, but different from the ones he had found in the cave. This one felt more physical, less ethereal, but just as scary. His eyes, however, carried the same yellow glow, staring directly at his window. The animal took a step forward, and when Henry blinked, it was no longer there. Only the cold night wind seemed to remain, like a warning. "They found me," he muttered to himself. The next morning, Henry met Margot in the village's small cafe. She had a tense expression, as if she already knew what had happened. Without waiting for questions, she slid a piece of paper toward him. "The next step. It's marked on the map." Margot took a sip of coffee before continuing. "The dogs won't stop until you understand what's guarding that gold, and it's not what you think." Henry opened the paper. It was a simple map, with an area south of the swamp highlighted. What's in that place? The past. And perhaps the truth. But go in knowing that the deeper you dig, the more dangers you will find. Before leaving, Henry stopped by the inn to prepare. He went through his equipment, checking every detail, but something was bothering him. The gold coin that was on the table was gone. "Margot, did you get the coin?" he asked, already on the way out. "No." She looked at him. "But I think the dogs took what's theirs." With no alternative, the two headed south. The path was even more treacherous than the initial hill. Twisted trees covered the sky, blocking out natural light, and the ground seemed to pulse with a strange energy. The tension in the air grew with each step. However, when they arrived at their destination, the scenery opened up. Before them was what remained of an ancient, ruined chapel, partially buried in the swamp. Its roof had long since collapsed, but the walls still held familiar symbols, those of dogs and their human prey. "This place looks older than anything in the area," Henry said, running his fingers over the inscriptions on the stones. "They say this was a temple, long before it was a Christian chapel. Dogs were here before men, and men made covenants with them." Margot crossed her arms, as if to protect herself from the freezing wind. Henry was watching closely when something caught his attention. A small entrance hidden behind fallen rocks. With Margot's help, he cleared the path and went down a narrow corridor. Down below, the darkness was even more oppressive than in the previous cave. At the end of the tunnel, they came to a circular room with what appeared to be a central altar. But this time, there were no gold coins. Instead, there were bones. Countless human bones piled around the altar and deep claw marks on the walls. "My God! What is this?" Henry whispered, feeling his stomach turn. Margot didn't respond. She was staring at something engraved on the floor, something that looked like an inscription in an ancient language. "It's an oath," she explained, kneeling down to take a closer look. "Whoever touches the dog's gold must pay a price. If you don't return it, it will become part of your collection." "Are they collectors?" Henry asked, horrified. Margot looked at him seriously. "No, they are guardians. This gold belongs to no man. It's a trap for the greedy." As Henry processed the meaning of the inscription, a sound echoed through the tunnel, the same deep growl he had heard before. The walls seemed to vibrate, and the room began to fill with a dense fog. Margot grabbed Henry's arm. "They're coming. We can't stay here." Before they could react, 3 pairs of yellow eyes appeared in the mist. This time, the dogs were completely solid, their fangs glinting in the flickering light of the flashlight. "They won't let us out alive, Henry." Margot pulled a short knife from her waist, but Henry noticed something. He looked at the altar and the bones around it. The inscriptions on the floor mentioned gold and the oath, and that. They won't attack us. Yet. They're waiting for me to decide. Decide what? Margot shouted as the dogs slowly surrounded the two. Henry took a step towards the altar. They want payment. They want me to leave something here, like everyone else before me. He searched his pockets, but they were empty. Then he looked at the flashlight. It was the only valuable object he had at that moment. Without hesitation, he placed her on the altar. The dogs stopped. The growls stopped. One of them slowly advanced, sniffing the altar, before grabbing the lantern in its teeth and disappearing into the mist. The other two followed, leaving Henry and Margot alone in silence. Back on the surface, Henry turned to Margot. They're not just protecting gold. They are protecting something much bigger. Margot nodded. There is more hidden gold, more traps, and more secrets. But now you're marked, Henry. Wherever you go, if you try to steal what belongs to them, the dogs will come back. Henry knew he couldn't stop now. Something on Dartmoor needed to be discovered, something that could change everything I knew about history, mythology, and human greed. In the distance, a lonely howl echoed through the swamp. Back at the inn, Henry felt that something had changed profoundly. The weight of the mark the dogs left on him was palpable, like an invisible presence that accompanied him at every step. Margot warned him several times. This wasn't just about the gold, but about the swamp, the buried secrets and the pacts made over centuries. As he organized his notes, images of the ruins and the inscriptions on the altar invaded his mind. He knew he needed clearer and faster answers. Margot, I want to know everything, not just legends. I want the truth about dogs, about this treasure. Henry's voice was determined as the two reviewed the map, now expanded with the new points of interest they had found. Margot sighed, as if she were about to reveal something she had tried to avoid until that moment. There is a man here in the village. He has faced dogs before. He survived, but didn't come out in one piece. He may not want to talk to you, but this may be his only chance to understand what's really at stake. Henry leaned toward her, intrigued. Who is he? They call him Silas. He lives at the far end of the swamp, in a cabin, but warning, he doesn't like visitors. The next day, Henry and Margot left early. The swamp fog was thicker than ever, as if the terrain itself wanted to discourage them. After hours of walking, they saw Silas's cabin, a rustic building covered in moss and almost swallowed by the surrounding vegetation. Margot stopped a few meters before the entrance. You go alone. I've gone too far with this. Good luck. Henry approached cautiously, knocking on the aged wooden door. After a few moments it creaked open, revealing a worn-looking man with a long grey beard and eyes that seemed to have seen things beyond human comprehension. What do you want? Silas growled, without even inviting him to enter. Answers. About the dogs. About what they protect. Henry was direct. Silas was silent for a few seconds, before opening the door a little wider and indicating for him to enter. The cabin was dark and disorganized, with books, ancient weapons, and talismans scattered everywhere. They don't protect gold, Silas began, sitting heavily on a chair. This is the biggest mistake people make, believing that treasure is the goal. So what is it? Henry asked, intrigued. Silas pointed to an old map hanging on the wall, which showed Dartmoor with symbols similar to those Henry had seen on the altar. Dogs guard a portal, something much older than us. Men called it treasure because they could not understand it. And the dogs are the judges. They decide who can approach. Henry frowned, trying to understand. A portal to what? Silas laughed, but it was a bitter laugh. I don't know, and I don't even want to know. I just know that whoever crosses the limit disappears, and whoever tries to deceive them, well, you saw the bones, didn't you? Henry nodded, remembering the underground altar. Why did the dogs let me out? Because you respected the rules. But now you belong to them. You can run, you can hide, but they will always be watching you. And if one day he tries to defy the rules again, Silas paused, staring at Henry. There will be no more mercy. Back at the inn, Henry began to connect the pieces of the puzzle. The treasure was not just gold or relics. He was a bait, a trap to attract the greedy, but also a test for those who sought something deeper. As he reviewed the maps, he noticed that all the symbols seemed to converge on a single point, the heart of the swamp, an area so remote that not even the locals dared explore. Margot, who was watching silently, shook her head. "You can't go there. It's suicide." "I have no choice," Henry replied. "If I'm marked, there's no point running away. I need to face this." Margot hesitated before finally handing something to Henry. It was the amulet she had used to ward off dogs. "That might buy you time." "Not much, but maybe enough." Henry left at dawn, alone. The swamp seemed more alive than ever, with every sound amplified and every shadow carrying an ominous weight. He followed the symbols on the map, each step closer to what he believed to be the final answer. After hours of walking, he arrived at a clearing surrounded by rocks that formed a perfect circle. In the center, there was another opening in the ground, but this one was much larger and more imposing. Engraved around her were the same dogs, but this time, their forms were intertwined with those of even more monstrous creatures. He knew he was on the edge of what Silas had called the portal. The air seemed to vibrate, as if the place itself rejected his presence. As he took his first step towards the center, the howling of the dogs echoed again, but this time it was different. There was no threat, just a warning. "I'm here to understand, not to steal," Henry murmured, almost like a prayer. Upon reaching the opening, he noticed something he would never have imagined. A pulsating light emanated from the depths. And then a voice, or perhaps a thought, filled his mind. Choice. Come closer and see what others feared, or leave and never come back. Henry stood still, torn between curiosity and terror, but something inside him knew that the choice he made here would not only determine his fate, but perhaps that of all who dared challenge the secrets of Dartmoor. The opening before Henry seemed to pulse with life, like a giant heart buried deep in the swamp. The light emanating from it oscillated between shades of gold and red, illuminating the ancient symbols engraved on the surrounding stones. The air was thick, vibrating with an energy that seemed to pull him forward. The choice was clear: go down and discover the truth, or retreat, knowing that I would never find peace. He took a deep breath, adjusted his backpack, and took the first step. The descent was slow and tense, with the tunnel getting narrower and narrower. The light ahead grew brighter, revealing a colossal underground hall. The ceiling was arched, supported by natural rock pillars, and in the center was a gigantic crystalline formation. Inside the crystal, Henry could see something moving. He walked to the center, feeling the weight of the presence around him. As he got closer, the shape inside the crystal became clearer, a gigantic creature with features vaguely reminiscent of dogs, but infinitely more terrifying. It was as if all the elements of the swamp had merged into one primordial being. The creature's eyes opened, glowing with the same intensity as dogs' eyes. Henry stumbled back, but the voice that echoed in his mind stopped him from running away. "Did you come to seek power or answers?" Henry tried to speak, but his voice seemed to block out any sound he tried to make. He closed his eyes, focusing on his thoughts. "Answers. I want to know what you are. What is this place?" The creature was silent for a moment, but its presence in Henry's mind seemed to expand. "I am the Guardian. I am the Pact. I was created to protect what does not belong to this world." Henry frowned, confused. "Doesn't it belong to this world? What are you protecting?" The light inside the crystal pulsed stronger, and images began to fill Henry's mind. He saw ancient civilizations, people digging for something until they finally found a portal. A glow similar to the one he now witnessed illuminated the ruins. It was a pure energy, capable of creating and destroying, something the ancients tried to control and failed miserably. The greed of men brought me into the world. I was made to stop others from making the same mistake. Those who dare challenge my rule face my children." Henry understood. The dogs were not just guardians, but extensions of the creature, sentinels destined to protect that forbidden secret. "Why did they let me live?" Henry asked, with a boldness he himself didn't know he possessed. The creature watched him, and the answer came with a weight that made his heart race. "Because you haven't chosen yet. He who enters this place must decide. Become a guardian or pay the price for his curiosity. There is no other way." Henry felt the ground shake beneath his feet. As he looked back, he saw the silhouettes of dogs emerge from the shadows. They were there, motionless, as if awaiting his decision. "Become a guardian. What does this mean?" he asked, trying to remain calm. "You will be one of them, connected to me, immortal, but never free. Your existence will be devoted to protecting this secret." "What if I refuse?" The creature did not respond, but the dogs began to inch forward, their fangs glinting in the crystal's light. Henry understood what that meant. Refusal was not an option that would leave the place alive. He looked at the dogs, then at the crystal, and then at the walls, filled with symbols that told stories of other people who had been there before him. No one had emerged unscathed. He knew that his life would never be the same, but the idea of becoming an extension of that creature, of losing his humanity, was unbearable. "No." He took a step back, his voice echoing in the room. "I will not be a guardian." The dogs stopped, and the creature inside the crystal roared, a sound that seemed to reverberate through every cell in Henry's body. "Then pay the price." The dogs advanced in one swift movement, surrounding Henry on all sides. He grabbed the amulet Margot gave him, holding it up as a last attempt at protection. The amulet's light flickered, creating a temporary barrier that made the dogs retreat for a moment. Henry took the opportunity to run. He knew he couldn't face those creatures directly. His only chance was to escape through the tunnel he had entered. The hall seemed to collapse around him as the dogs pursued him relentlessly. The walls shook and stones began to fall, partially blocking their passage. Henry crawled through the rubble, feeling the dog's claws almost reach his heels. When he finally saw the light from the surface, he gathered all the strength he had and jumped out. The dogs stopped at the tunnel entrance, growling fiercely, but did not follow him. Apparently, they could not leave the confines of the underground domain. Back in the swamp, Henry fell to his knees, panting. He looked at the amulet in his hands, now cracked and dull. Margot was waiting for him at the edge of the swamp, and when she saw him, she ran to help him. "You're alive," she said, surprised. "What happened down there?" Henry stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of terror and resignation. "I discovered the truth, and they will never let me forget." Margot frowned, but before she could ask further, the dogs' howls echoed through the swamp. They weren't far away. "What do we do now?" she asked, alarmed. Henry stood up, determined. "We didn't run away. There's no way. Dartmoor's secret is bigger than me, than any of us, but maybe there's a way to end this." He knew his journey was far from over. The mark the dogs left on him was both a curse and a key to understanding what really lay in that portal. But to end this, he would need to go further than he had ever imagined. Henry knew there was no time to waste. The swamp pulsed around them, as if the dogs were getting closer and closer. The heavy air carried not only the sound of howls, but the palpable sensation that something larger was approaching. Margot, at his side, looked at him with a mixture of disbelief and determination. "You talked about ending this." "As?" she asked, panting. Henry clutched the cracked amulet in his hand, and with the other, removed the crumpled map from his pocket. It is no coincidence that the legends about dogs, gold, and the portal are so old. This secret was hidden, but not destroyed. If dogs are here, it's because someone created them, and whoever did this may have left a way to undo the pact. Margot shook her head. "And you think you'll find that answer in the middle of a cursed swamp?" Henry smiled, but it was a tired smile. No, but I think we are both doomed. So what do we have to lose? The two moved quickly, following the marks on the map. Henry knew they needed to get back to the heart of the swamp, where the entrance to the portal was located. He had seen the inscriptions in the cave and heard the words of the creature in the crystal. Something there suggested that the pact could be undone, but the price would be high. With each step, the howls grew louder and closer. The ground seemed to shake, and shadows moved among the surrounding trees. Finally, they arrived again at the circle of stones that marked the edge of the portal. This time, the place was different. The stones glowed with a pulsating light, as if responding to Henry's presence. In the center, the opening to the underground was even more visible, and a powerful energy emanated from it. "They are surrounding us." Margot looked around, pulling out the short knife she always carried. Henry looked at her. "Don't fight them. It won't help." "So what do I do?" "Give me time." Henry slowly approached the center of the circle, where symbols were carved into the ground. He removed the broken amulet and placed it on the floor, along with the small diary where he had recorded all his notes about the dogs and the portal. "They don't protect gold, they protect the secret of the portal," he muttered to himself. He stood up, looking at Margot. "The only way to end this is to close the portal. The dogs will not disappear while it is open." "And how do you intend to do that?" she asked, visibly nervous as the howls turned into growls around her. Henry looked at the opening in the floor. "I think I need to go back in." "No. Did you see what's down there? That will kill you." "Perhaps. But if I don't, they'll keep hunting me. And so will you." Margot hesitated, but the sounds around her were increasingly threatening. Finally she nodded, her eyes filled with sadness. "Then go, but don't delay." Henry didn't respond. He took one last look at Margot and, without hesitation, climbed back down through the opening. The descent seemed longer this time, as if the swamp itself was transforming around him. When he reached the main hall, he found the crystal pulsing intensely, the creature within it more alive than before. The dogs were there too, surrounding the space like silent sentries. But this time, they did not advance. "You're back," the creature's voice echoed in his mind. "I'm here to end this. The portal, the dogs, the pact, everything. You don't understand. It cannot end what it cannot control." Henry stepped forward, staring at the crystal. "Maybe I can't control it, but I can destroy." He withdrew the lighter from his pocket and held it in front of the crystal, the light shaking as if the creature reacted to the threat. "You won't survive. It doesn't matter." Henry lit his lighter and threw him against the base of the crystal. The small flame at first spread quickly through the cracks from the floor, reaching the crystal and the altar. The hall began to shake violently, and the creature let out a roar that made each fiber of Henry's body vibrate. The dogs, who had remained real estate so far, began to advance, but the flame had already consumed the base of the crystal. An explosion of light filled the hall, and everything was silent. Margot eagerly waited in the stone circle, his knife still in hand. The swamp was abnormally silent, and the light emanating from the portal had disappeared. Suddenly she heard steps. Henry emerged from the opening, covered with dirt and visibly exhausted, but alive. "Did you get it?" she asked hopefully. Henry looked at her, but did not respond immediately. "The portal is destroyed, and the dogs, I think they are gone." Margot looked around, as if he expected to see the dog silhouettes in the shadows, but everything was calm. She breathed with relief and smiled at Henry. He finished. "No." Henry shook his head. "They may have disappeared, but what I saw down there, it's still stuck, and something tells me that one day you will find a way to leave." Margot was silent, processing what he had said. "So what do we do now?" Henry gave the swamp one last look before turning to Margot. "Let's go. But for now, we never talk about it again." As they walked away, a light howl echoed in the distance. There was nothing to see, but Henry knew that the swamp kept secrets that not even he could fully understand. And perhaps it would never be safe to return. Months after the events in Dartmoor, Henry was back at his home in the United States, trying to resume the life he had left behind. However, the swamp experience had irreversibly changed him. He spent hours in his small office, surrounded by maps, notes, and crystal fragments he had managed to bring with him. It was like abandoning the mystery was impossible. One night, as he reviewed his notes, he heard something that made his heart stop. A distant, low but unmistakable howl. He got up slowly, walking to the window. Outside, the street was deserted, illuminated only by the posts. Nothing looked out of normal, but Henry knew that wasn't any sound. He returned to the table and looked at the piece of the crystal. It was small, but the light emanating from it was enough to fill the environment with an almost alive presence. He touched him carefully, and at that moment, the feeling of being observed became stronger. Henry walked away quickly and closed his eyes, trying to ignore the shiver that roamed his spine. The brand of dogs was still with him, and although he had not seen any of them since he left Dartmoor, he felt that his connection to the swamp had not been completely broken. While silence was overwhelming the environment, one question plagued him. Would he really end the cycle, or just postpone the inevitable? After all, secrets like Dartmoor's are never buried forever. What did you think of this outcome? Leave your opinion in the comments. We love to know what you think, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like to support our work. See you in the next video.